Welcome to the Dark Ozarks. We are discussing the dark history of the eastern Arkansas Ozarks, from pirates and steamboats to secrets in the swamps, riots, and more. We will get back to that in a minute, but first we want to remind you that the Dark Ozarks podcast is now available on Branson Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Substack, or about any other podcast platform. So many people may be surprised to hear that there were pirates and notorious serial killers who operated in the Ozarks, among other surprises. What do you think is the biggest surprise?
I think that people are going to be surprised by how far back these nefarious activities go, as well as the rich river culture and how all of it is connected to other parts of the country.
We will return to the things you didn't know happened in the Ozarks, but first we want to invite you to like, follow, and subscribe to Dark Ozarks on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as your favorite podcast platform. We also invite you to become a Dark Ozarks subscriber on Facebook. On the Dark Ozarks Facebook page, click subscribe, have your login information ready, and join Dark Ozarks behind the scenes for only $4.99 per month.
Your $4.99 per month subscription allows you to come with us on paranormal investigations, deep dive research, and topics too controversial for public view. The next 100 subscribers will be entered in a drawing for a free Dark Ozarks t-shirt and an exclusive signed first-run copy of the book, Dark Ozarks, The Spooklight. Subscribe today to be entered in the drawing.
And now you can get Dark Ozarks t-shirts for sale at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com.
We encourage you to check out Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri, in person and online on Facebook and at the website alwaysbuyingbooks.com for all of your reading needs, including a large section on the paranormal, history, and more. Not to mention, the building is haunted. Tell Bob and Elise that we sent you.
We also want to thank Beard Engine Brewing Company in Alba, Missouri. Beard Engine Brewing is the only English-style brewery in Missouri and has been twice named Missouri's best brewery by the Missouri Brewers Association. Great beer and great food in a historical building with a noir past. And yes, their building is also haunted. Tell Nate and Tiff that we sent you.
Great stuff. Great books. Great beer, great food. I still want that grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a good brown.
Well, we're just going to have to do it.
We are, and we will, and we may even shoot a video while we're there. So, of course, this is our short format, essentially our teaser here on YouTube live, and we will be having the long format on all of these topics going up tomorrow. And for folks who are listening live on Wednesday nights, you can always catch us also live over on Facebook. But something that I think might really come to us as to a surprise for many people is the impact of riverboats, steamboats, your traditional steamboats that they had on the Ozarks. To me, I think it's quite surprising at times how far inland, particularly including the White River and the Osage, that the riverboats were originally able to make it. Of course, both of these rivers were impounded in the 20th century. And so there's dams that are in the way, and we have giant lakes. But just as a quick segue into one of the most horrific steamboat disasters that was ever to take place, just a couple of notes on riverboat history in the Ozarks. And the first boat, this is of course very comparatively speaking early on, and Captain Albert B. Smith was the first master to risk his boat, which was the Batesville, above Forsyth, Missouri. And Captain Will Shipp steered the boat to the mouth of Bull Creek. For those who are familiar with Taney County, you'll be very familiar with Bull Creek, 16 miles above Forsyth. And that was in 1876 and brought out 2,000 bushels of wheat.
And for most people, when they think about these rivers and like Bull Creek, the thought of steamboats coming up is really hard to imagine now. And you go further north, and steamboat trade was critical as well, up at, say, Osceola,
Yes.
which was a major commercial center until the Civil War, when it was burned. In our whole conception of the Ozarks being a landlocked area was created after this phase of transportation, really.
It was. And of course, rail would ultimately compete with and win the competition against steamboats. But there was a golden era in the 19th century in which steamboats were king in this region. And the steamboat port at Forsyth, which is only about 11 miles from my house, connected this county to Memphis and New Orleans.
Yes, I mean, you don't really think about it, but it's amazing that those things happen, and consequently, then is related to what still stands as the worst military maritime disaster in American history.
And it's one, of course, for people who are familiar with the Western theater and the Western War and immediately following the Civil War, they will be familiar with the disaster of the Sultana, but many people are not today. Unfortunately, it was almost a side note at the time because of what else was going on in the nation.
Right. This is immediately after Lee's surrender and emancipation of prisoners of war from prison camps in the South, basically loading Union prisoners on steamboats and bringing them up the Mississippi. Unfortunately, greed intervened, and because they were paid per soldier, and the Sultana ultimately had a devastating accident that cost the lives of, was it 2,100 people almost?
Yeah, it was 1,169 documented deaths.
Okay, and then a number of injuries as well.
Yes, absolutely. And of that 1,169 deaths, 1,047 were Union soldiers.
Yes, on their way home.
Yeah. The devastating aspect of that from a personal or human standpoint. These were men who had fought, had been captured, had survived prisoner of war camp, and then with the end of the war were finally being released and having and in this position to be able to say, it's done, it's over, I get to go home. And the passenger transit upon which they were aboard near Memphis at the time exploded and killed over 1,000 of them.
Mm-hmm. Plus crew members and civilian passengers as well, including women and children.
Yes, 122 civilians and crew members were killed, including 5 children, I believe. And that was the number of children who were on board. All of the children on board perished in the disaster. It was a boiler explosion, which was in late 20th century Star Trek terms, it's like having your antimatter reactor go up.
Yes, it's in a definite hull breach.
Yes. It blew the ship apart and set it on fire. And that I found it very interesting in the sense, and this is from this particular article reference, which I will mention in a moment, that if the Sultana were a Civil War battle, the disaster itself would rank as the 11th most costly battle in the war.
That puts it in perspective.
It does.
And on that note, we probably ought to encourage you to tune in tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about this and many other things in depth. So it's going to be very interesting, and we appreciate you all. And don't forget to check out upcoming events and merchandise at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com. Thank you again to Always Buying Books and Beard Engine Brewing Company for helping to bring the Dark Ozarks to everyone.
On the next episode, we're going to be discussing surprising connections between the Ozarks, Egypt, and Egyptian mythology. Catch the Dark Ozarks podcast on Branson Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Substack, or just about any other podcast platform. Thank you, everyone. And remember, there are no easy answers,